So on the outside, like I said in my early impressions, this phone looks almost the same as last year's phone. But if you think this phone is almost the same as last year's phone, turns out you're missing a lot. So the more you use this phone, the more you look for weaknesses, the more impressive it gets. S24 Ultra has dropped in a class-leading 6.8-inch Quad HD AMOLED display, and it is awesome. These Ultra phones have had, 120 Hz LTPO for a while, and they've been this really sharp Quad HD for a while now too. So now it's up to a max 2,600 nits, which is awesome outdoors or anywhere, but it also gets extremely dim at night too, without any of the weird banding I've seen in some other phones. And they've flattened the display completely and brought the display right up to the very corners with some of the thinnest bezels we've seen all the way around. Plus there's also this new anti-reflective coating on this Gorilla Glass armor that makes a noticeable difference with certain light hitting it at off-axis angles. And then there is a crazy fast ultrasonic fingerprint reader underneath to top it all off. And maybe I wish the touch target was a little bit bigger, but that's about it. Honestly, if you're a screen snob, it doesn't really get better than this one right here. This is the phone you should get. The Energizer phone that we saw at CES at one time, but as far as reasonably sized flagship slab phones go, it doesn't get much better than this. Again, they're keeping a 5,000 milliamp hour battery in one of the best performing battery phones from the past few years, despite making it thinner and keeping the S Pen, so you might as well get this one. So we're seeing all these phones with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 starting to come out, and they're looking really good. Great high-end performance, there's efficiency gains all over the place, plus this phone pairs it with 12 gigs of RAM, and it is a multitasking champ. And if it's a stylus you're into, I already know you aren't really considering any other phone. The S Pen is basically the only high-end stylus still going in slab smartphones. It's really good for note-taking, drawing, highlighting, all that stuff. But if you're like me and you hardly ever use that, there's still the gaming performance and the everyday performance. There's the newly added ray tracing, plus a 90% larger vapor chamber to cool the phone for much longer stuff. Turns out it's an A+. Okay, cameras. There's a lot of other phones out there that you could buy if your $1,300 specifically has to go to the best cameras. The Pixel just won the blind camera test. Sony has the best manual mode. Like, there's other great camera systems. Like, you've seen this camera array before. There's 4 cameras on the back of this phone. Turns out they're basically the same cameras as last year's S23 Ultra except for one. So there's a primary camera, an ultra wide, and a pair of 2 different telephoto cameras. The primary camera is still the ridiculous 200 megapixel sensor with all the same pros and cons. It's consistent and versatile across the board. It has great dynamic range. It's a quick shooter with quick autofocus, and it's also always binning down to 12 megapixels, and you should almost never switch it to the 200 megapixel mode unless you have incredible lighting. It has an ultra wide with a bit of distortion near the edges, but it's actually meaningfully wider than the primary camera, so it's really fun to shoot with, even though the automatic macro mode from it looks like trash, and you should just turn it off anytime it turns your pictures from this to this. Pro tip. And then it has a medium range 3x telephoto camera that kicks in smoothly and matches the colors and exposure from the main camera really well. It means all the photos in the gap between 5x and 10x look sharper than last year. And then you can literally put the 10x photos side by side from the S23 Ultra and the S24 Ultra, and the new 5x cropped in actually looks better. Plus you can still zoom all the way in and shoot at 100x if you still want to take ultra stable pictures of faraway objects like the moon. Like, the S24 Ultra shoots everything HDR by default now. It's actually in Google's new Ultra HDR format. So when you have, specular highlights or big dynamic range differences in a photo, it will tastefully crank up that stuff for a more dramatic looking picture on the phone screen, similar to what Pixel and iPhone already do. And this passes through all the way from capturing the photo to viewing it in the gallery, and then one more step to actually publishing it on social media. This phone now has a ton of helpful AI features built in that are actually good. They make a meaningful difference to everyday use. So we were just talking about photos a second ago. The second you're done taking a photo and opening it up in Samsung's Gallery app, there's a ton of useful AI-driven stuff that you can do with it. And it's kind of all based on what sort of scene it auto-detects that you've taken. So lots of photos just end up with a remaster button where you click it, and then it can add some contrast and brighten things up a little bit as needed and gives you a solid before and after. But if your photo has some glass or a window, it'll show you an erase reflections button. And then you can literally go in and circle the reflections you want to get rid of, and it'll generative fill what should actually be in the glass. And it works pretty well. Now with this photo, I didn't take it in portrait mode, but it's recognized that there's a subject, and so it'll offer to add background blur. And even without a bunch of extra depth information, it analyzes the subject, and it lets me add a little bit or a lot of background blur with a pretty damn good cutout, if you ask me, to just create a portrait mode shot out of thin air. So you open any photo, hit that edit button, and then there's this little blue-green button with the stars. That's Samsung's new magic editor. And once you're here, you can just go nuts. You can move the subject around a photo and have it generative fill in the background, or you can have it remove things entirely from the foreground or the background of a photo, like photo bombers or just unnecessary random objects. I actually found this super useful. You can open it up and tilt the horizon to whatever angle you want, and instead of cropping, it will literally generative fill in the outsides of the photo, which works very well because usually the outside of the photo is the least important part of the photo. You can get away with generative fill. Now, I also find it hilarious that if you use the magic editor to alter a photo on this phone, it'll add a little watermark to the bottom corner with these little stars so that you know that this photo was AI manipulated. Which is good. That's a good responsible thing to do, especially if you're going to upload this to social media. But then you can also immediately erase that watermark with a built-in object removal tool in Samsung's photo editor app. Phone call translation feature, or the new voice recorder app getting much improved speaker labels and summaries and transcriptions. The Samsung browser will now do summaries of web pages. This might all sound very familiar, but the best new one, in my opinion, is Circle to Search. Now, Google Lens has been around for a long time. In my opinion, one of Google's most underrated products. So people might have already known that you could basically do this already, but it would take several steps. Circle to Search just makes it one step. It's much faster. It's pretty awesome. You literally just hold down on the home button or the gesture bar at the bottom and then circle or tap whatever on your screen that you want to Google search. And it just immediately Googles over the top of whatever you were doing without leaving that app. And it's so useful. Just even during the week I've been using this phone, I've searched pictures, parts of pictures before. It almost always works, just like uploading it to Google Lens. I've searched objects right in front of me through the camera viewfinder. I've searched random landmarks. You can also search text, and you can even append text to your search. And I was just constantly impressed by how fast it is. And it basically works as expected every single time. And it would just Google whatever was on your screen and help you out. But that was everything on your screen. And they kind of ended up wrapping that into Google Assistant.